Hey everyone, Cynics here, and today I'm going to share with you guys 7 tips for post-processing your art. I know that sounds like a silly clickbait title, but I assure you there's going to be some useful information in this video. So I have a little bit of corner kick art for you guys, and I know it doesn't look like my style, and that's because the line art was made by Jimmy Yin, and I'll have a link to his art in the description below. He's a nice guy. He let me paint over his drawing, which is something I haven't done in a very long time, and this is the result. As always, I painted everything in Corel Painter, but now it's time to go into Photoshop and have some fun adding some post-processing effects. I'll just bring up the layers window so you can get a better idea of what's going on. And as you can see, I made a quick mask of the foreground objects just to hopefully speed up this process. All right, here we go. Tip 1 is all about adjusting our colors and values. So we want to make an adjustment layer, and to do that we're just going to duplicate our main art onto another layer, and then we can go to the image menu in Photoshop and apply all sorts of little fixes to our colors and values. I actually think the auto tone and auto color features in Photoshop are pretty effective. If your colors or values tend to be leaning way too much in one direction, this will help try to balance things out in the middle. Of course, you might prefer a more hands-on approach, so there's a lot of little things we can mess with in the image adjustment menu. The level sliders can help you mess with the overall brightness or darkness of a piece, but I don't recommend messing with that too much. Instead, you might want to try upping the output levels just a little bit off the pure darkest dark. This is especially helpful if you're going to be doing printing because it gets rid of the pure 100% black tones that will show up a lot stronger when you print. If you're really into controlling every aspect of your colors and lighting, I recommend going into curves because this is where you can really mess with the darkness and lightness of a piece. But more importantly, you can go into each color's individual channel and really mess with the hue balance. This is a great way to change the overall warmness or coolness of your art. Of course, the benefit of doing this on a duplicate layer is you can always erase out parts you don't want to change and just leave the parts you do want to change. So that's all pretty good for colors, although if you really want to mess with value a bit more, you can try going into calculations, and that's under the image menu as well. You can select 2 source channels to blend together into black and white, and this helps you really control what kind of overall look you want to your values. I recommend trying different options and then saving the result to a new document. This way you can just copy paste your results onto a new layer above your art and maybe mess with the blending options. I recommend setting the layer to luminosity for the best result, and then just adjust the opacity to decide how much of an effect you want it to have. There we go. I think I like having the blue hair just a little bit darker. And anytime you're satisfied with your changes, I recommend merging everything back to one layer. Tip 2 is going to be Chromatic Aberration, and I know it's become a giant art meme, but it still has its benefits when used appropriately. In order to create this effect, we're just going to duplicate our layer, then right-click the new layer, select Blending Options, and go into our Advanced Blending. Here you can uncheck a couple of the channel boxes. I recommend unchecking red and blue. And now when you move this layer around, you're going to see that strong chromatic aberration effect. This effect usually looks best when you're using it on really close-up macro shots or maybe portraits. So it's not going to be as useful on this particular art piece, but I'm still going to throw it around here and there. And once again, just erase out all the parts that you don't want to apply this effect to, and it gives you a lot of control over what you're doing. One of the main benefits of chromatic aberration is really breaking up the harshness of line work, but I really didn't leave that much line work visible in this one. Oh well. Tip number 3 is Highpass Overlay, and this is one of my favorite techniques for sharpening a piece. It's a much more appealing sharpening effect than any of the standard sharpening filters or brushes. All you have to do is duplicate your main layer, then go up to Filter, Other, and click on Highpass. I know it looks super weird, but don't go too overboard with the settings. Once you have that weird gray layer, just set the layer blending property to overlay, and like magic, everything will suddenly become a lot more crisp and sharp. Now, of course, I'm sure you won't want everything to be super sharp, so now you can really just erase out the things that are either farther away or out of focus. I'm not sure if the results will show up that well on video, but I assure you this is one of the best post-processing techniques. Sharpening is fun, but if you really want to get into depth, you're going to need to make a blur layer. I recommend using a Gaussian blur, which is just under the filter blur options. And you can set it pretty strong if you want, because you're going to be doing it on a duplicate layer. So you can, of course, erase out as much as you want at different opacities, and even set the whole layer opacity down a whole bunch. For this image, we're just going to be blurring up the background a bit and hopefully making it look like it's even farther in the distance. That layer mask I made came in handy a little bit, but I still had to clean up those edges a lot, so it wasn't really a huge time saver. Tip number 5 has to do with dust and lighting. This time I'm just going to be making a new layer, not a duplicate layer, and setting it to color dodge. This way I can pick a nice darkened hue and just go over some spots to really add some lighting effects. The bottom of this image is supposed to look like a lot of dynamic lighting being poured through some trees. So of course I'm going to add some little beams of light to maybe emphasize that a little bit. But I'm also going to try to light up the side of the image that's closer to our light source just to make it a little less static. The other thing that I really love to do is to add another layer and just make some little dust particles and things floating in the air anywhere where there's some sunlight. This really isn't made for outdoor scenes, but it can look really great on some indoor scenes. I'll demonstrate it a little bit regardless. This tip is really a great one for digital art. Once again, just duplicate your layer, then go up to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. This will add a little grit to your piece that will make it less painfully digital. It also coagulates the entire image into being a lot more cohesive. Alternately, you could try adding a paper texture or something, but I think the Add Noise filter works just fine. Just be aware you shouldn't really do any more painting or drawing after this step. It would look out of place. Tip number 7 is pretty optional, but I wanted to go over it anyway. If you want to add some custom Instagram filter type effects to your art, you might consider trying gradient maps. You can just duplicate your layer, then go up to Image Adjustments Gradient Map, and try to find a gradient that looks interesting, or maybe even make your own. Once you've done that, you can just play with the layer properties and the opacity to really make it look like a nice added effect. You can do all sorts of fun retro effects as well. Anyway, I think that's about it for my 7 post-processing tips. I'll be honest, this artwork wasn't the greatest demo for this video just because I was pretty satisfied with the colors already. But at least you can see that you should be using these tips on all of your artwork. I'll quickly show you guys a few examples of these tips used in other pieces I've done this year. This one was just a 30-minute speed paint from a stream, but you can see I applied Chromatic Aberration, a Gaussian blur, and a little bit of a dusty lighting effect. Here is some artwork from the Ab Anatomy video, and you can see I applied a Highpass Overlay to the foreground, a Gaussian blur to the background, and then some dusty lighting effects as well. Lastly, we have this image, which has a strong color adjustment layer to separate the foreground and background, some chromatic aberration, some high-pass overlay, some Gaussian blur, and some dust effects. So a little bit of everything on that one. Hopefully you guys learned something useful today. I tried to share any information I've picked up over the years on this subject. You can definitely apply all of these tips to photography as well, so feel free to share this video with anyone you think might enjoy it. Alright, I would like to thank all of my wonderful patrons for making this video possible. You guys are wonderful. And of course, thanks to everyone watching as well. See you guys.